Okay, last part. So this is a few hours, I guess, after the last stream. In case somebody hasn't seen the previous ones, I started with showing how I set up the perspective grid for this illustration, and then the connection for some reason cut to YouTube. And then I resumed the second stream and I decided to make a playlist out of these live streams. And this is the last part. Now I had a few minutes to clean up this building, and I was thinking that maybe I could show some of my editing tricks that I use for editing my illustrations. Because this phase, I think, is always very important when it comes to bringing together all the different colors. So I thought it's nice to kind of like break it up into a few streams. But I realized that I have now been working all day here, doing this one illustration. So with my previous live streams, my idea was to kind of like space them out into different times of the day so that it would always be optimal time of the day to at least someone out there. I understand that this can't happen to everybody simultaneously, but at least that was my theory behind it. But now that I have been thinking about this stream and the connection issues that I had before, I realized that if I have to space out the live streams throughout the day, maybe it's not optimal for anybody. So maybe this sort of like partial segmented live stream is not something that I will do in the future. And this was supposed to be in 2 parts, not 3, but due to technical difficulties I have to resume the connection, and I cannot piece together videos in YouTube. But maybe we'll do the live stream of perspective sometime again in a single video, but with more focus. Sorry about this. Not much that I can do, though. I had some time to take care of the dog. She had a proper freak out, and now she seems more peaceful. So everything is good again. So my intention with this illustration is not to get rid of all of the sketchy lines here, because I kind of like those. I understand that this is not to everyone's taste, but everybody's also free to make their own pieces of artwork, and I recommend that you do so. But I think overall it's going okay. During this whole year, I've had a bit more reports from YouTube about live stream conditions, and it's not about like the local internet connections, but I guess they have been experiencing a lot of like cutouts due to the increased demand, and I understand that. Not really much you can do about it. And I thought about the advice that I gave in the last stream about just like working with whatever situations that you seem to be in the middle of. So I thought that it would be kind of not okay not to follow my own advice, and just like finish this live stream, even though I've had all of these difficulties. I do think that this illustration is worth it. I think it's an interesting challenge for me to use flatter colors for once. I guess that's the idea why I am working on this brush. It just makes me focus more on the graphic qualities of the brush strokes. And it's a look that I like. And it's one of those brushes that kind of like forces one different style out of me. So I like that already, but it's not finished. Like, as you saw in the previous live stream, it still kind of like surprises me sometimes with the scale differences, and that's a glitch that I want to get out of the system before it's done. But this is why I do dozens of illustrations before a brush is finished. It's just a lot of testing and failing, tons of failing. Well, I have followed the wrong perspective guide in this beam, so I'm gonna fix that. As you can see, it's supposed to be going to this direction, but I have just put my brain on hold and followed the wrong direction with this guideline. I guess the size of many of these railings doesn't really make that much sense. It's really just a decorative element, I guess. Hey, Candy Girl. I'm sorry we missed you in the previous stream. It's there. I was thinking if I should maybe delete the live stream, but I guess people can just like choose not to watch it. They don't feel like it. No, I'm not taking a course on digital painting. I have actually been a teacher for many years on digital painting on courses, mostly for video game schools. But I guess it would be fun to go to some sort of course again. I went to this sort of like Finnish school for a 3D course on Blender a few years ago, and it was nice to be a student for once and learn new things. Sadly, Blender changed to the current version, or gladly, because Eevee is amazing. But that also means that like all the skills that I learned of Blender are kind of like irrelevant now. But I have now been watching this other tutorial series that I might talk about in my future videos. Sorry that I'm squinting that, but because last time part of the screen was cut by the elements, so I had to squeeze all of my windows down to really small scale, so sorry. Reading the text is a bit more difficult right now. Hey Mikko, I'm in a very early stage of drawing and sometimes I just find it difficult to keep going and get some motivation. Right after looking at these amazing artworks, I usually open my digital painting software and try to do something as well, but I end up always giving up. I guess I just focus too much on details. Yeah, that's a very common, like, don't feel bad because like a lot of people go through the exact same thing. But details are something that you probably like doing because you kind of like default to working on the details. So try to put them as this sort of like treat to the end of the process. Like for example, for me, I haven't touched these clouds yet because I have a very specific idea on what I want to do with these clouds for this piece. Like I can see it in my mind even though I haven't even blocked them in yet. But I'm not touching them because there are so many things in this whole piece to work on, but I'm excited to get there because I know I like doing that part, so I'm saving it as last for that specific reason that it will motivate me to keep going. Oh. I have no idea how to put the arc there, so I'm gonna use the same trick that I used earlier. I'm gonna put the opacity of this layer or drawing guide to full opacity. Then I'm gonna do a circle. That's not thick enough. Not chunky circle. Okay. And then scale it up because this will affect the line weight. And then transform it in freeform mode by aligning it with these corners. Somebody was asking at the end of the last stream how to do this. And I already showed that in that stream, but just in case somebody missed that part. So I'm aligning it with these corners in the vanishing points. It doesn't matter if it's not aligning to the place where I want it to be, it just has to be on the same direction. Okay, so once these are done, then you can like move these middle point convert points so that you can get the arc to the position that you want it to be in. Like so. And then I just delete the rest of it. And then I'm kind of like giving it this sort of like very vague guess of a shadow. It's not that precise, but I'm only going for like impression. But when I look at it from this distance, that's the level of detail that I need. I could go crazy and think about like how the balcony casts the shadow to what part, but nobody else is going to look at the picture that way. And if I do that sort of treatment, that makes this area the most important part of the entire illustration. So the level of finish should also kind of like focus the attention to the areas where you want people to be looking at. That's also partly why I added those sort of like extra details to this circle shape, because I want people to wonder that what is this mysterious hole in the building. guess one of those things that like I absolutely need to fix is adding trunks to these trees, because that's one of those things that is easy to forget and it's kind of like embarrassing. Like for example, I've done like many portraits where I have just forgotten that a person has ears, just not drawn them in and only noticed later. It's like, oh my god. I'm not proud of for doing that. These sort of lines are the ones that are kind of like part of this specific style, and because I'm using this like high opacity non-blending brush, it kind of forces me to think about grouping the brush strokes so that they are kind of like easier for the viewer to understand that this is a group of brush strokes that has its own shape language and it's part of this group. These sort of like curly lines don't appear in the surrounding objects, and therefore it's easier to kind of like group these brush strokes into this one object of tree or cypress tree bush thingy. Then Daniel is saying, it happens to me that when it comes to time to start, I'm motivated, but I feel like I'm slow to do things because I'm very perfectionist. Well, perfectionism is just like very fancy here. For that, I think it helps if you can start looking at perfectionism as not a virtue, but something that is like seriously hindering your progress. Like for example, all the art that I do on this channel, I get a lot of comments from people who said that like if I had done it like if I had done this painting, I would have done it like this or that. But it doesn't really matter if they haven't done the painting. Sometimes it's better to like just do 1000 okay paintings rather than just like one amazing one. Bear Lewis. I think I should like scream that comment. I've finally been able to be part of a live. Okay. Yeah, well, I guess that's the side effect of like splitting this stream into 3-part playlist, is that at least it's on a bigger time scale. I don't know what's the right word to use for that. Okay, I think these trees are like good enough. Speaking of perfectionism. And just to recap what I said in the earlier stream, I'm also painting these trees in perspective. So I'm following these sort of like lines here, even though it's an organic mass. And this is the same way that you would, for example, paint characters into an illustration that has different perspective. And with these hills, I'm doing the same thing as with the trees, that I'm trying to make the brush strokes be more uniform and therefore hopefully kind of like easier to digest. Hi Mikko, what is the recommended size of canvas for an artwork to be uploaded to Instagram? Don't know why, but even I use the canvas resolution, it still looks broken after being uploaded. I don't usually upload to Instagram the original files. What I do is that I go into the gallery section of my iPhone and then I take a screen grab of the high resolution picture. It's still slightly bigger than is okay for Instagram, but it's not too much bigger. And the reason why I do this is because I kind of like sharpen it over to what it will be in the end. And I use there are two different sharpen tools in the photo mode. There is a normal sharpen and then there is definition. Definition does the exact same thing as sharpen, it just does it in a larger scale, and I wouldn't recommend like going overboard with that, but I add usually just like few notches of a definition too, and then a little bit more sharpen. You wanna avoid doing that over the point where you can kind of like see halos over different objects. But this will add a little bit more sharpness to the image, because after you have uploaded it to Instagram, it will be compressed by Facebook's servers to preserve space. Especially if it's an old post, your older posts will be more compressed than the new ones. So this sharpening will kind of like counteract that with the definition. So it kind of over sharpened, and then after it has been compressed, it will still look kind of the same that it did on your phone. I don't know if that helps. At least you can try it. After a few tries, you will find kind of like how little sharpening you need to apply to get the better result. I also did this to my last post, The Heart of the Darkness, that I just uploaded to Instagram today. And I do the same process for images that I upload to Twitter, and that is because Twitter has a very high resolution limit to how big images you can upload there. So I don't want people like stealing my images, so that's why I don't upload the original files, I upload the screenshot versions. Also, it saves me a lot of time from like making these different gallery version edits to be saved and stored somewhere. It's quite fast. Wow, this sounds like some sort of like Top Gun music. How is this on my actual playlist? I mean, I have chosen this song. Apparently I like it. I don't hate the Top Gun vibes. It's just surprising. I feel like I should be wearing aviator glasses. I guess BB-8. The ones that I bought from Cambodia. Oh, I really hated these hills when I started this stream, but I really like the way that these sort of like easy brush strokes are coming. This is the sort of stuff that I would hate to paint if there was more friction on my screen. It's just very rewarding to paint when the stylus kind of just sweeps across the glass. I know that's not for everybody, and if you want to use a screen protector, go and use one. There's a weird part there that I want to erase. This. Super distracting. I'm gonna flip this entire thing upside down. And I'm gonna put the drawing guide on, because even though I'm painting sky, perspective matters, because I need to know from which angle I'm looking at these clouds. I'm almost confused by the fact that the normal blend mode is in the middle of different blend modes as opposed to being at the top. I guess that is from like 17 years of like exclusive Photoshop painting. Some things you can just never grow out of. They want to have it behind everything after all. Am I the only one who forgets to eat when painting? No. I just did that like one live stream and then the connection disconnected and then I did another one and it didn't seem right to just do like few minutes of live stream, so I ended up painting the whole building, which is not something that I intended to do in the first place. And then when I stopped, I noticed that it was almost 4, and I hadn't eaten since coming from the gym class, which by the way was really tough. I don't know if it's a good tough or bad tough. There were some like really weird movements. Anyway, gym and all day of painting, and I was just completely dying. I just suddenly noticed that like, wow, I might die. So I went and ate right away after the stream. I'm gonna do some like lazy artist stuff now and just do another layer and then just change the color. First I'm going to use this palette to try and find a color that I could maybe use. That seems pretty okay. So what I'm going to do with this is Mikko think new layer, color fill, and then set it as a clipping mask. And then dropping it down, and then putting the first layer back on. And then I'm going to go into warp tool, and then just push this slightly up, so I can get like this sort of like sunset fringe starting point. Like this isn't going to replace the entire fringe, but it's going to make painting one much faster for me. And then new layer, and I'm gonna set this as a clipping mask to the layer below, and then just paint the light in. Do you like to draw people too? Yes, I've drawn lots of people. You can see them in my gallery. Just during the recent few years, I've drawn more and more landscapes, and let's just enjoy it now. I always feel like I need to fight this urge to like promise that I will paint people too soon, but like I don't need to promise that, and I will paint them if I want to, so I don't want to commit to something that might cause me stress later by agreeing to it. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate this, and it's going to look very scary for a second, but just hang on. It's going to make sense later. I'm gonna take out the curves so that I can only get some light out of these clouds. And I don't want it to look too green, so I'm gonna take out the green curve layer. It's looking pretty purple, so I'm adding a bit of yellow by adjusting that. And then I'm gonna set it to additive. And then do another curve, because I noticed that it's still affecting the shadow areas. That's not what I want. So I see those two little peaks. And then this is the important part. I'm setting it as a clipping mask first. and then I'm adding a mask. It's important to do this as a clipping mask, otherwise it won't work. Because if you don't set it as a clipping mask and then you drop it down, you will get all the blackness on the fringes of the normal blend mode layer, and it will look super ugly. Hi Mikko, have you ever painted miniatures? I have one cow in the living room. I haven't painted it though yet, so maybe no. I guess you mean one of these like Dungeons and Dragons type of thingies. And the answer would be like hard no. I appreciate the skill though. But you have to understand that like any kind of like crafty stuff, like for example wrapping Christmas presents, I'm terrible at that. I'm like really terrible at that. And even though I have successfully few times made myself like canvases and the base for the oil painting canvas, and it is a lot better than something that you can buy from a store, still I'm so terrible at all of that sort of like craftsmanship stuff that I usually buy my own canvases from the store. Now this is just a normal blend mode layer. People asked me about that hand paint question earlier, and I recommend like checking that your pressure sensitivity is set in a way that you don't accidentally do the death grip on your stylus. The stylus will stay in your hand without like squeezing the living crap out of it, but if you are squeezing it too tightly, then adjust your curves so that you will get to the maximum pressure with like less pressing. And you can get to it from here, from the tool icon preferences, and then just go to edit pressure curve. Don't worry about like breaking it. By default it's linear, so you can always delete the curve if you set it wrong. This is kind of like a reflection from the ground to these clouds. It's a very subtle hue change. Because it's cloud, I think. Doesn't need to be that high contrast. Also, these are in the background. I recommend sometimes like doing a cloudscape like this with just like 100% opacity hard brushes or brush like I'm doing here, and just seeing that can you give the illusion that it's a cloud without making smooth gradients. I think that's a really good exercise. Now I'm adding a little bit of fringe to those shadows cast in the building top part, so that the light is bouncing off different parts of the building and hitting the white faces again. And I'm setting this as a clipping mask. I kind of like that like high level of saturation. I know it doesn't look like especially realistic, but it's not exactly a realistic picture to begin with. I'm just more concerned about the emotion and the questions. I think the questions are more important in any concept image than the answers. Because if you can make the viewer ask interesting questions, then you have made the whole experience personal. Of course, I can come up with my own answers, and I do. I have an idea of like what the function of this building is and why the ring is there. But I don't feel the need to like explain everything to the viewer, because that might sometimes like take away from that sort of like personal experience of experiencing the story and their own story that is more personal to them. You can't really go and tell a person how they should be looking at your image. Also, that's not the point of art, I think. What movies do you love because of the aesthetic and the scenery? I guess it would be easier to answer what video games I love, because like video games, especially like old 90s video games, they are a much bigger inspiration to me than any movies. But if I think about movies, to be honest, I've been watching so much TV in the past few years, and lately I haven't had that much time to watch movies. So like this, now that I'm like really trying to think about it, those aren't really like my inspirations, but I can say like few examples that I think have great scenery. I love the buildings and the whole sort of like art direction of Tekkon Kinkreet. It's based on manga about black and white characters. It's not very typical looking anime, but yeah, the background looks really great. There has to be more than just one. Trying to think while I'm painting. Do you have any tips on slow painting? Well, I made this like whole video about how to have patience for the painting process. And I think that whole thing is also really important if you're one of those people that gets frustrated after painting for a while, because painting takes a long time. I used to have this sort of like Sunday afternoon anxiety because the week was starting again and I felt like I had wasted my free time during the weekend if I hadn't done any like finished artworks, and you just can't probably get one done in a evening if you haven't started one earlier. So just finishing an entire painting in one sitting, I don't know if that's like a realistic goal to have. I know it's a boring answer, but painting takes so much like humility. It always surprises you how little you know, and you will never be done. It's always just constant learning process, and it's really hard to get used to that mindset. Especially when you're teaching art to kids, and then you have to kind of like balance these two things, that there are people who need your guidance and like you need to like give them the tools to help them be artists and to go through that path in a more efficient way, because I think that's the actual real benefit that I can offer, because I can't do the exercises for them, but I can guide them on a path that like they will do the exercises in a way that they will learn faster and it's less frustrating, and they are more likely, not certain, but more likely to get to their destination where they are going. I think that's the best that an art teacher can do. You can kind of like help them, but in the end, all of my students who have like improved a lot during a course, they are like, I think that they are 100% responsible for where they get with those skills, because they put in the work. Definitely. I never feel like yes, I turned this student into a great artist, but like I feel like I was there when they did the work and improved. I'm just stalling on the movie question. I keep thinking about that. I have said many times in these streams that like one of my favorite movies of all time is Ghost in the Shell, but obviously my art is in science fiction and it's not a big source of inspiration either. I just love that movie and I love the soundtrack. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it, and that's like one of the only anime movies that I can recommend in any language, because the original English dub is so good that it doesn't matter if you watch it in English or the original language. wanted to merge these lines earlier, but I realized that I can actually use these curves. I'm doing this sort of like gradient by using these graphic shapes by setting as a clipping mask and then just painting with my bigger brush, like really thin lines in the middle. I actually inverted the grass, not just the layer mask. I don't know how that happened. And that's it. It just adds a little bit more variety to those hills. Wow, I'm pretty battling with this brush right now. I'm trying to get rid of this weird part here. Okay, patience. God damn it. Come on. It's just not happening. Okay, I think this whole cloud area is actually destroying the whole dark and light contrast in this corner. How do you get clients to appreciate the style that you do? I don't. This is many questions that like have this sort of same vibe. How do you get somebody to do something for you that you can't? And you probably should stop trying. And maybe just listen what the client wants. If there is a too big of a gap between what the client wants and what you can provide them, in those instances it's just better to say that like this is not a good fit. I hope that you will find an illustrator that is better suited to this job. Unfortunately, I just recently had to do this with one client. What process are you using? The description ones. No, I think that's a good point to clarify. I'm making this sort of like ink brush for myself, and you don't need to buy any of my brushes to use this, because you can get really close to the same brush by using dry ink. And I've been using dry ink for years for many of the pieces that are in my gallery, and that's a free brush that is already in your Procreate. There are just like few issues that I have with the brush that I just thought a few days ago that like, screw it, I can make this better, and I'm going to. So I started working on this new one. So far I'm in a phase where I have two different brushes that are just the same brush with different variations, so that I can block in huge areas like those clouds, and then work on the details like these trees in the foreground with smaller brush strokes. But they are the same brush, they just have different size limitations. Actually, I like that purple on the cliff side. Eesh. Do I like it? Yes, no. I wasn't intending on it doing it with that hue, but unfortunately it seems to work. So I guess that's what I'm doing. I was thinking about these bushes and trees here. This would be probably such an element that it will take a really long time to finish, and it would be kind of like boring for the stream. So I will finish these trees. I will just make a few to show what kind of thoughts are going through my head while I'm working on these. But there's going to be a lot of these to finish. So I think I have assisted drawing on right now, and because these are organic elements, I'm just doing like a few brush strokes alongside these sort of like alcoves in the building to give the impression that they are kind of like following the forms of the building. But I'm being pretty loose with this, because as the building is doing these different shapes, these trees are growing along the surface of the building, but over time they kind of like grow over them. It's kind of like half and half. You don't need much detail to pull off that kind of like effect that they are interacting with each other, because these are pretty distant brushstrokes anyway. But these are small trees, so these are too far away from the building. They wouldn't be able to get that far off into the distance. Also, that was in a weird spot, because it's right in the middle of that bridge area. So that's why I took it out. I don't wish that you could be like me, Balza, because you can make your own type of art. That is something that I will never be able to make, and I think we will all be better for it when you make something that is a piece or an idea or way of seeing things that is unique to you. And I think those ideas are the ones that are worth the work. Now I'm at that point where it's just difficult to see what I'm doing by having this drawing guide even on, because even the thin lines, even though I had set them into very low opacity, they are still distracting because they are gathering a lot of attention, because I have tons and tons of broken lines. I guess that's part of my style, no matter what style I'm doing. I like broken lines, except maybe in the style that I just posted, that part of darkness. Anyway. So pretty much in any picture, whatever is breaking the rule, what you are seeing the most, that usually becomes the most attention-grabbing element. And in this case, that was the straight perspective lines, because there aren't any lines that are perfect lines that aren't broken in this piece. I'm doing a lighten layer as a clipping mask, and then I'm painting by hand this sort of like small, very high saturation fringe to this shadow. This is kind of like exaggerated reality. And it's more obvious when there is a soft object that the light is coming through. But I'm just pretending that there's like massive clouds or something casting this shadow on the building. Okay, now I think it would be good time to add some sort of like fog rolling over the hills here. Do I still have the trees separate? Yes. Thank Lord. That would have been awkward. Okay. Am I okay with this? Maybe. I'm just using this as a dummy to see where I can use this layer mask. I just received a picture message from the next room. Apparently it is sleeping like a very relaxed looking corpse. By using this sort of like low opacity erasers, I'm kind of carving more and more different kind of like value range into the distance when it comes to this hill range. And it's a small difference, but it just adds a little bit more value range and depth to the whole thing. I hate saying depth in English. It just doesn't fit well into a Finnish-speaking person's mouth. Okay. It's a small difference, but it just makes those hills recede a little bit more. But there are those flowers on the hills that I completely painted over when I simplified these hills, so I'm gonna bring a little bit out of those more. Any tips on how to separate layers? I usually draw people and I separate layers by skin, hair, clothes. Wow, that's a lot. I usually use as little layers as possible. It's only in this like crazy editing phase where I have tons of layers. but when I'm painting, I try to keep the layers quite simple, just because if I need to keep thinking about the layer order and where everything is, it's really hard for me to focus on the actual painting. But I understand, like skin and hair, you might want to have as separate layers, but at some point maybe try... I don't know. Maybe try using less every now and then. It's not for everybody, but just see if it could like make that process easier. Now I'm just adding more like grouping to different types of layer strokes. As much as I like these clouds, it was kind of distracting from the main point of contrast here. I think that's better. How long does it normally take for you to do one painting? Like, that completely depends on the painting. That's why I don't have like a set price for commissions. I usually try to ask what the commission is like, and then I can give a time estimate, and I can set like a price cap on like how long I can work on that piece, and if we can agree on that, I can do the painting for that price. But like every piece is different and has different requirements. For example, if there are like very technically difficult things to accomplish in that illustration, then it's probably gonna take more time. But these days I'm a bit more aware of like the different types of clients, so I try to take on commissions that are kind of like a good fit for my style. If somebody has a huge laundry list of things that they want to be included in the commission, then probably I'm not the right artist for that commission. So I have gotten a bit better at saying no to those. I think with editing I'm gonna need to punch up a little bit more contrast to these like very lower right corner heels to make them work. I kind of like the punched out saturation of it. Pinterest doesn't really work for me. When I have this like time pressure, somebody's asking like what inspires you. A lot of people are looking at Pinterest app, and I am too, but like it never works for me. I have this like intention that like now I'm gonna go to Pinterest and get inspired. It never works that way. And then when I start painting, something completely different starts out. By the way, for the first of these 3 different streams, I had already this like plan. I thought like I'm gonna practice some shapes and then I'm gonna do that painting, so it's not gonna be as stressful when I start painting in a live painting situation. None of that panned out at all. This is a completely different thing that I thought I would do. I had in my mind like this sort of like completely different plan of a illustration, but it just wasn't exciting for me. And then I was like, okay, let's just see where this goes. I hope this doesn't suck, I guess. And I don't know, does it sound horrible if I say that I don't think this sucks? I'm pretty excited to do like architecture for once. Somebody said in the, I guess in the first or second stream that like, have you thought of like doing different style for once? And I read that later when the stream had uploaded, and I thought to myself like, different style to what? If you look at my Instagram gallery, for example, it's been about 8 or 9 different illustrations that I have done at least like the same style, and I have switched before I did this one, and even then it was like with painting process and not these like full opacity ink things. But okay. I'm gonna squeeze this a little bit to give like these particles in the air this sort of like fake perspective, because that's what all of these 3 streams are now about. And then I'm gonna just flip it, rotate it, and warp it back. And erase some of those bigger leaves. And then once more. It's very like fall colors. How did you do, Daniel is asking, how did you do that fisheye perspective grid on Procreate? I also explained that in these live streams. I think it was in the second one. I can do a separate, I guess, tutorial on that. I think it's its own thing. So even though I explained it, it might be better that I just show it in practice. So it will be easier for you guys to follow if you want to do that again. Also, in that video where I do it, it's kind of like, it's not just fisheye, it's also 3-point perspective. So that might not be the best place to start. I'd recommend doing like 1-point perspective with that first. Also, there's a different rule set for 1-point perspective where all the lines that are coming towards the camera, they are straight, they aren't curved like the other lines are. I was actually thinking about that like tutorial a few days ago, and what I came up with is that since so many of my videos here on YouTube are 4K, maybe I could do the grid itself and just slap it on screen for a few seconds, and if people are watching on YouTube on PC, they could put it to full screen and then just hit a print screen, and then they could have those guides from there. I have to say that I was like completely... It just like knocked the wind out of my sails when the stream crashed earlier today. Yeah, that wasn't great. I was already like rushing to get everything done, and I was happy that I could like announce a live stream for once. But then that happened and I was just like completely crushed. Seems like so stupid drama, but this has been my whole day, so this is the most dramatic thing that happened. But I'm glad that I came back and did the finishing part anyway, because I know that this might be like pretty gross for some of you to hear, but I really like this painting now. I love this building. I wish this was a video game that I could go and explore. It looks exciting to me, and I'm happy that I didn't give up. But after the middle part, I honestly just like went to the couch and I just felt like, oh, should I just delete both of these streams and not do it because the crash happened? I hope this answers some of those questions about feeling like quitting. Don't. That's all I can say. Don't. Okay, that's the piece. I have few ideas of like what I would like to name this, but I guess I'll see. I'm glad that I got to do some of the like the color editing too for once in a live stream, because usually you don't get to see that in these live streams because there's only so much time. I'm so relieved. Seriously. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have you thought about opening Patreon? Yeah, probably. I will need to think about that before I run out of money and I will have to shut down the entire YouTube channel. Maybe. I don't know. If I can get the taxing figured out. That's really difficult to do here in Finland. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming. Like, I hate it when all of my live streams like end like with 5 minutes of like dumb speech that I should just like press the button and quit it, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. There are still stuff for me to learn about all of this, Thank you for everybody who came to see these live streams, even though I crashed in the first one. Yeah, there's nothing I can really do about that, since that's a YouTube server thing, not even my own internet connection thing. But that will happen sometimes. And anyway, I'm gonna go now. I need to go and walk the dog and maybe give her some scratches.